Thank you so much, Neves Gunnar. We are very pleasure having you here in our interview. We are very fans of Nelson. We love you guys. I have many CDs in my collection here,
Oh man.
and I'm very proud to have you with us.
Well, it's my pleasure, and your English is much better than my Portuguese.
Oh, no
Thanks so
problem.
much.
Look, we love Brazil, and we love our Brazilian fans. It's been way too long since we've been down there, and that was because we went on a promotional trip to Brazil. 1991 or 1992 was when we did it, and we found ourselves in Sao Paulo, and it was just my twin brother and myself as playing acoustic guitar, and the promoter down there booked us opening up for Sepultura, and it was just the two of us on acoustic in front of Sepultura, and it was just dangerous, man. You know,
Wow.
it was pretty crazy, but it's been way too long, and we have to go down there. The best rock fans in the world are in Brazil, like for real. I
Same.
mean, you guys are crazy about it in a great way.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We love you too. And yes, you saying about the Sepultura is very dangerous to play with him, but in the time, in the 90s, it's worst because they
Yeah.
have mad the grunge scene and alternative rock.
Yeah.
It's getting worse. The people is more radical.
Well,
Yeah.
in that venue, it was a football venue, so they were rocking and drinking for 3 straight days, no sleep,
Whoa.
and there were fights everywhere in the audience and glass bottles being thrown. It was pretty crazy, but
Eh,
but it was just a Wednesday to you guys. You're used to this, you know.
so, you talked about your twin brother, and we want to know if you guys have any new news about your concerts, because we know that you have a tribute to your father, Ricky Nelson, right?
Well,
And
yeah, we've done that in years in the past, but now we're doing more Nelson shows. Now it's more.
oh,
There's a big TV show here in the United States. It's called The Peacemaker, and it's with the wrestler John Cena. And coming up this next year, they're featuring Nelson music in that TV series. So I have a feeling we're going to start getting requests for more and more shows, which is kind of nice. So that's some pretty big news.
that's very impressive, actually,
Yeah.
because these series are very, very well known by the public.
Oh, cool. Cool, cool. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to film with all of those people. It was great, and we got to play a big giant Nelson concert for them, and they're editing a video together for it that I'm sure you'll probably see. It's going to be a lot of fun, but we're going to start doing more concert dates and stuff, and especially out of the country as well. Americans, we tend to stay here way too much. You know, we don't travel as much as you guys do, but we got to start doing that.
Yes. And talking about you as a brother, how was the Matthew? And do you keep in touch with father off the stage? You living next each other? How was your living as a brother?
Okay, now, what is the word for twin in Portuguese? In Spanish, it's gemelo. What is it in Portuguese?
Genius.
Genius.
Okay, cool. He lives 5 minutes away from me. He's right down the street. So, like, I'm in my live room right here. I've got my guitars, my amps, and my drums, and all that stuff. This is where we rehearse. He comes over and practices, and we do band rehearsal right here. We have lived separately from each other for a lot of years, and there was a time when he lived on one side of our country, and I lived here in Nashville, Tennessee. He was in Los Angeles, and that's like a 4-hour flight. So I would only really see my twin when we would perform on the weekends. We'd meet up at a gig or a couple of gigs, and I'd see him, and then he'd go back to Los Angeles, and I'd go back to Nashville, and we missed each other. So he decided to move out here, and we see each other every day. We're really close.
It's
Oh,
very nice because it's not every sibling that has a good relationship with each other, right?
especially
So
especially in
yeah,
music. You think about the guys in Oasis. I mean, they hate each other. You know, back in my father's day, you had the Everly Brothers, and they didn't get along either. But Matthew and we're best friends. We get along just great.
that's very
Uh,
nice to hear.
in the interviews that I read with you guys, you were very close to each other. You were almost one person. I think
That well,
you think the same. You pass for the same problems together.
we're a good complement to each other. People don't know this, but Matthew is right-handed and I'm left-handed, and so
Yeah,
for every similarity, there's also a difference. I tend to be a lot more aggressive and driven and focused, and Matthew tends to be, well, what can I say, just a lot kinder and more peaceful and more docile. And together, it works out pretty well.
It's the yin yang thing.
It is. It is. Works for us,
Uh,
though.
uh, yes. It's because you were the drummer.
That's right. I started out being a drummer. I just like to hit things.
Yeah, and you beginning to play guitar, acoustic guitar. You was almost an adult, I think. Yeah, or not?
Well, I actually was a drummer first. My brother and I started playing when we were very young. And all the way through grade school and high school and all that, he played the bass and sang lead vocals. And I played the drums and I sang backup vocals. And then our father died when we were 18. He was in a plane with his band on his way to a show. And when we lost him, we basically had to grow up really quickly. Was that was really the choice. And we took 1 year off from 18 to 19 years of age. And during that time, when I was recovering emotionally from everything, I did what a lot of people do. They pick up the guitar and they try to learn something to distract themselves. And I just focused on that for 10 hours a day, every day for a year. And then we basically put the sound together for what would become our rock band Nelson. And I was up front for the first time and playing guitar and singing the lead vocals. And that was really the Nelson sound. We found out that my voice was better suited for the lead vocal, for the lower register. And my brother's vocal, he's got a much higher range. And so together that worked really well.
Yeah. And how was your influences by the vocalists or bands? Because your sound of the Nelson is not similar to the hair metal bands, but it's not so distant from what happened to that scene.
It's
But
a little weird, isn't it? You don't know, because it's not really heavy metal, but it's not pop, but it's kind of like
yes,
a lot. Well, the reason for that is because where Matthew and I grew up was in Southern California. And in 1967, when we were born, to like 1975, there was a musical sound that came out of Southern California. And it was, they called it the California sound. So it was like the Eagles and Crosby, Stills and Nash and Linda Ronstadt and Neil Young and all of that. That was happening in Southern California. But all of that music really comes from more of a folk background, right? Heavy metal tends to come from blues, so it's really, it's got the chord progressions are different and they're edgier. So you have the with Nelson of a heavy rock band, but you have the musical DNA of the folk movement, not the blues. It is the same thing that bands like Queen or Boston did with their sound. Like if you listen to More Than a Feeling from Boston, what is that? It's got the attitude of heavy metal, but it's not heavy metal. And it's got more energy than straight pop music. It creates its own category. And I just think that that's what happened with me and Matthew growing up with our father's music and that California sound, and then listening on the radio to these bands that we loved. I mean, we loved, of course, you know, the Led Zeppelins and the Van Halens, but at the time we were listening to a lot of Tesla, and really liking that influence. And then you add the vocals of the two brothers singing together, and it just gave you something that was unique. And hopefully, if we write good enough songs, the songs are catchy and people like them. And, you know, music used to be different before it was categorized. In the 60s going into the 70s, there were no formats on radio. It wasn't like you'd put a rock radio station on and they were just playing rock. In our country, they played everything. So you'd put on the radio, and back when I was growing up and starting to make music, you could hear an Elton John song right next to a Bee Gees song, right next to a Van Halen song, right next to a Metallica song. It was all over the place. And I actually really enjoyed that. I enjoyed not having the restrictions of a definition. And I just wanted to make the best music I could make, you know, something I would enjoy listening to. And so that's the way I approached what Nelson's music was. It's just, and I found that actually Brazilian fans got that right away. There was no judgment. They liked it. So cool.
I used to say that Nelson, the people who lives and the people who lies. There's some people that say that not like Nelson, but they are not able to admit they like Nelson because the sound is amazing.
They had girlfriends that listened to Nelson, and they secretly listened to the songs when the girlfriend wasn't around because they wanted to be cool. You know?
Yes, it's almost listen to Bon Jovi, Danger.
Cool, man. But for me, look, when I listen to music, I'm sure like you too, your musical collections are all over the place. You've got so many things in your playlist, and it depends on your mood. Depends on how you want to feel, or a moment in your life that you want to be connected to in that moment. Like for me, when I was growing up, one of my favorite places was the summer camp I went to in summer. And so to this day, when I hear Supertramp, Breakfast in America, I'm 8 years old back in summer camp, and I'm there and I'm feeling all those feelings. That's what we love our music for. It's like little time machines, and it keeps us connected to these memories and these moments in our lives that are really important to us. Our songs are our friends. They're what we could always rely on, no matter what. If we had a good day or a bad day, we knew that there was a song we could listen to in our house or in our car that would make us feel the way we really needed to feel in that moment. And being a small part of that for people all over the world that we might never meet is really cool to think about. You know, like maybe right now, somewhere in Brazil, someone is getting ready for their day and they're listening to one of our songs and they're grooving to it and they love it. And, you know, that's the reason why we do what we do.
And the culture, it's something that really reflects in the music and the way we live, because Nelson, I must admit that Nelson was very important to me. I don't know if I'm a girl. I don't think that Nelson songs, like the earliest Nelson songs, would affect like Leandro the same way it would affect me.
Right.
Because like After the Rain, Can Live Without Love and Affection, they are songs that tells what a girl wants to listen to. And since you talked about the boyfriend thing, I must admit that that's true. And I want to know that if you, like, how did you guys receive the huge success? How did you guys get over that success without like losing your minds and stuff? Because
that's a good question. But being twins and having the both of us, it helped keep us grounded. It was nice because at some points it did get crazy. And you can lose perspective and you can lose yourself in all of that. But we also have the benefit of coming from a show business family, and it goes back 4 or 5 generations. And being in entertainment is just what our family's always done. Much like being in the circus would be for a circus family. So we were always taught from a very early age that an entertainment career has peaks and valleys. It ebbs and flows. You have your big years, you have your down years, and that's what a career is. That's what you do, and you navigate that. And that taught us to not take the high points too seriously in a bad way. And also at the same time, don't take the low points too seriously, because that will correct as well. So I think it was a combination of having my twin throughout all of it, and also having the family background that I had as well. It was easy for us too, because I mean, I grew up with a father that was far more famous than me, and I got to see what he went through. Even as a small child, I could look up and see what he was going through, and he was a very kind man, and he was very connected with his fans, and he always took time for people. And that's what always kept us grounded when we actually got our first success, to remember to represent our family very well.
And all your family is connected with you guys in your musician career. Your father influenced you to be a musician, you and your brother. I read, I can't remember when, but your grandma helped you to style, I think, or it's not.
Well, she didn't help us choose the style, but she actually really enjoyed it. She loved the long hair. She thought the long hair made us look like Vikings, and she liked that. So she approved of that. My brother and I actually were the ones who designed the look, because you mentioned that you liked the song After the Rain back in the day, and Something That a Girl Wants to Hear. There's one line in the song that is, "Don't be afraid to lose what was never meant to be." And when I wrote that line, I didn't realize what an impact it was going to have on a whole generation of kids that were growing up. We're growing up, we feel awkward. You know, we get our hearts broken, and we think we're just going to die the first time our heart gets broken, and it's just awful. And I remembered that feeling, you know, growing up and going to school and being awkward and trying to get a date with a cute girl, and always kind of being in the friend zone. That's why we all started making music in the first place, is because guitars make guys more attractive. You know, so I wanted to write some good songs that people would connect with. And then I realized getting into it that it was far deeper than that. It's, I mean, this is a crazy world that we live in now. You know, there's weird stuff going on all over the place. And if we're not careful, we can descend into a feeling of hopelessness and despair and anger and being separate from one another. And we're really not. You know, there are just a lot of bad people trying to sell us a bunch of garbage. But as rock and roll fans, you know, we actually can see through that a lot better, because we all connect on our music. We have this shared love. And you might have one guy over here that, you know, loves Sepultura and loves Megadeth and Metallica. And you know what? Every now and again, he wants to listen to a little bit of Nelson, just a little bit. You know, and that's okay. That's who we wanted to be. We wanted to be, we wanted our place actually to be in people's lives, to make them feel uplifted and encouraged and hopeful. And it's not a sales pitch. It's actually just really who we are. We're really that way as people, and we wanted our music to reflect that.
And how you guys are seeing that time by the bands, the hair metal bands, they bands like you guys, or didn't, or some bands only help us? How was the relationship with the other bands about the hair metal?
Question, man. Good question. Well, back in the day, in 1990, when we first released our record, there was a lot of judgment and a lot of hate from a lot of those bands. We're talking like Winger and Warrant and Poison and all of those bands. The funny thing is, they're now like some of my best friends. I mean, I'm living in Nashville. Kip Winger lives right down the road this way. Mark Slaughter lives right down the road that way. And we spend a lot of time together. And I do a side project called Scrap Metal, which is all the lead singers from all of those bands in one band. And I'm the guy that runs that. And the irony was all of those same people that I'm talking about that wouldn't tour with us back in 1990 because for whatever reason they didn't think we were rock enough or whatever, and all that. Those same people back then would hang out with us back then too, you know. So business wise they had to keep up this persona, but personally we all got along really, really well. And I think what it took was certain artists that were more established and were at the point where they were at the legend status in their career to say good things about Nelson and Matthew and Gunnar in the press. So it started out with Jeff Skunk Baxter from the Doobie Brothers. He was the first guy to say, you know, you really should give that music a listen. It's a lot deeper and it's a lot more intricate than you think. You know, because believe it or not, as a songwriter, it takes a lot of work to make a song sound simple, if that makes any sense. You know, when every note counts and you want to write songs that people are humming in the shower, they don't know where it's coming from, but all of a sudden they're humming this song and it's driving them crazy and they don't know what, and it's like, oh, it's a Nelson song, of course. That's who I want to be. I want to be that guy that writes those songs. So back in the day, I didn't let it bother me that much. And we switched directions because we were always looking to go out with a big tour. We wanted to go out and do a package. And none of those guys would take us on tour. So we had to go out in the very beginning. It wasn't our ego, but we had to headline. We had to go out because it was either that or stay at home. So when Nelson started, we started out headlining and we started at theaters. And we started to build up into arenas and then into sheds. So on the After the Rain album, it wasn't a matter of ego that we were going out and filling these big giant places and headlining. It was because no one would take us on tour with them. So we had to do that. And that's the way our career has really always been. If we've found there was some sort of a bias for whatever reason, or someone closed a door in our face, we just go through a window. And I think that's the way you got to live life, man. We've never been anybody's victims. You know, we just want to have a career. And the most important thing is to get the songs out to people. And the good thing about the internet is that, look, we're having a conversation right now. Okay. I'm in Nashville and in real time, I'm talking to my two new friends in Brazil and we're exchanging ideas, and we can do the same thing with our music. Same thing. It can be instant now. And I know they say there are like 10,000 songs released every day, but I just want to release one song, let's say one song a month that people absolutely love. And we've written hundreds of songs now. So with the internet, we can actually just get more and more and more out. And hopefully a certain song will catch your attention. Like in our case recently with James Gunn, the director of The Peacemaker, there was a song that I co-wrote with Mark Slaughter, and it's called To Get Back to You. And it was a big ballad that we did on a record called Lightning Strikes Twice. And at the time, I felt the song was special, but we had kind of done the record through a label called Frontiers in Italy. They funded the record, and they left me alone, fortunately, to actually make the record. And on that one song, it's a ballad, I knew it was special. So I spent the money and I got a real string quartet to do the strings on it. I hired Steve Lukather, the guitar player from Toto, to do the guitar solo. And we did the song, and that was 15 years ago. And we just forgot about it. We released it, and it wasn't ever even released as a single. And then here we are years later, 15 years later, and we get a phone call that James Gunn's favorite song from Nelson is called To Get Back to You, and he wants to put it in The Peacemaker, and would we be wanting to do that? And it was an incredible phone call. But in my business, you never know when that happens. You can make art 20, 30 years ago, and it can come back around in a magical way. Songs live forever. You know, if you do them the right way, they never age. And if you do a great song that doesn't have kind of like a dated timestamp on it, it really can live forever. But even the songs that have that kind of dated sound to them from a specific era, like some songs from the 80s, especially pop music, that's what makes them cool, is that they are dated, and I feel like I'm back in the 80s when I listen to them. So you can't lose in my business. The only way you lose in what it is I do is if you give up, if you quit. If you get to the point where making music and going through everything you go through to make it. I mean, look, we're not doing construction. We're not working on a roof in the middle of summer. I respect people that do that. I do. But the one downside of what it is I do without having to put a hard hat on every day is I have to motivate myself. I have to keep myself going in this vacuum where there's no information at all. And I'm not getting any feedback from people. And I'm in my studio and I'm recording something and I'm imagining it turning out well. I have a lot of hours where I'm by myself in the studio. I'm alone, and I'm not getting that connection. That's the hardest thing about what I do. But what makes it worth it is all these years later talking to nice people like you who go, "Hey, I really liked what it was you did 30 years ago." It's pretty cool. Not many businesses can say that.
And it's like building a build, right? Like, and even though the build you can destroy, music you can't. Like, that's the weirdest part. So you were talking about your friends and stuff, and in the 90s, you recorded a song together with your brother with George Lynch for his Secret Groove. The song is called "We Don't Own This World," and we want to know, like, how this invitation went. Like, how does invitation go?
Just to take you back, when I was learning how to play guitar, when I was going from being a drummer to being a guitar player and taking that 1 year off, at the time there was no internet. There was no way to go on the internet and hit YouTube and put in the name of a song I wanted to learn on guitar, and someone would be there showing me a lesson. We didn't have any of that. The height of technology at the time was a series of cassette tapes called Starlicks. And Starlicks, you could go down to Guitar Center, and there was a series of perhaps players that you wanted to emulate, and you could buy the cassette and the book that went with it, and you could just read the sheet music and play along to the tapes. Excuse me. My favorite Starlicks tape back in the day was George Lynch's tape from Dokken. So I mean, I loved Dokken. I was a big fan. I loved the way Don sang, and I loved George's guitar playing. I mean, I'm a big fan, and so I was learning how to playing along to George's tape. So let's warp forward. It's 4 years later. I've learned how to play guitar. We've made the After the Rain record, and we're on a big tour. And we started out going out headlining in the smaller places. The next step for us was being asked then to go out on tour with Cinderella. So it was Cinderella was headlining, then Nelson, then George Lynch's band, Lynch Mob, who we had at the time. So it was those three. It was the first time I met George. I was so excited to meet him. And I don't know if you know George personally, if you've talked to him. He's a very interesting guy. He's very much an artist. He lives in his head, and he can be different throughout the day. You never know which George you're going to get. You know, sometimes he's the nicest guy in the world, and sometimes not so much. And the first time I met George was the first rehearsal for the tour. And I walked up to him and I said, "Mr. Lynch, I'd like to meet you. My name is Gunnar Nelson, and I can't tell you how honored I am to be on the same tour as you." And he turned around to me and just instantly said, "My record company wouldn't give us tour support because you're on this bill. Screw you," and walked away. That was my first time meeting George. So I was like, well, that's kind of a bummer. And as the tour progressed, I would look over to the side of the stage, just like I saw other former haters like Kip Winger. I'd look over to the side of the stage, and there would be George at the monitor desk watching our show. And he never missed it. And we had an amazing guitar player, you guys. Our guitar player was a guy named Brett Garsed, and we found him in Australia. And he is truly the best guitar player in the world. I can say I've worked with the greats. And Brett he should be far better known than he is. He's an amazing guitar player. And George would watch Brett play every single day. And then before you know it, I would go down to the dressing room, and George was having Brett show him things on guitar. We started to become friendlier and friendlier. And then I was able to tell him, hey, bro, look, seriously, don't ever do that again, because I was a #1 fan of yours, and I learned how to play to your tapes. You have no idea what kind of an impact you've had on me. And I got good George that day, and we connected, and we became friends. So we go through that whole Cinderella tour, and everybody's pretty happy and all that, and then we let it go. So we finished the tour. 2 weeks after the tour finishes, I get a phone call, and it's George. And George is in Hollywood, and he's in the middle of making the Sacred Groove record. He has written a song called We Don't Own This World with Dawn. And as people know, that Dawn and George's relationship goes back and forth a lot. You know, they've done a lot of fighting, those two. And apparently that morning, George and Dawn got into a big fight before Dawn was going to come in and sing his vocal. And George just said something. He didn't mean it. He just kind of thought, he goes, well, screw it, man. I'm going to have Gunnar sing this song. You can stay at home. And Dawn was like, oh, yeah, sure. That's where I got a phone call. And the next thing you know, I'm down there in the studio actually singing the lead vocal to one of my heroes' songs, because he got into a fight with another one of my heroes. And it turned out great. Matt came down and sang the harmony on it. I really, really like that song, and I really like that vocal. And the tragedy of it was, at the time, politically speaking, we were actually on Geffen Records in the United States, and there was a record executive named John Kolodner, and he was kind of this superstar record company guy. If you ever saw the Aerosmith Dude Looks Like a Lady video, he's the guy that turns around with the beard in the wedding dress. That's a real guy, okay? At the time, John Kolodner was working on Aerosmith, and he had gone through this whole thing where he was making Aerosmith go in and re-record whole albums and all that stuff and not releasing anything. So he was very controlling, and unfortunately, I screwed up because I didn't get permission from my record company guy first before I sang on George's record. So that song wound up being what George's record company wanted to be the single. And John Kolodner wouldn't let them release it as a single because I was featured on it. To this day, I still regret that, because I think just in my enthusiasm, I didn't think things through, and I think it hurt George, and I apologize for that. But on the other side of things, I got to sing on a record with George freaking Lynch, which is pretty cool. So I really do. I like that song quite a bit.
That is something that I go to my friends in the middle of the night and I say, do you know that Nelsons have a song with George Lynch? And they go with me like, no way. And then I show them and they go, wow. Was the same thing with Leandro today. Oh, it happened today. It was very nice.
That's cool. And you know what? The song sounds great. I think the song's and it makes a lot of sense, because I learned a lot of my rock vibrato from listening to Don Dokken singing. You know, Don Dokken in his prime, man, the guy could sing. You know, I mean, really. And George was my favorite metal guitar player. Well, actually, he was right up there. Of course, I always loved the Scorpions, and Michael Schenker was also one of my favorites as well. So those are my favorite guitar players. Michael Schenker, George Lynch. If I want to listen to stuff that's more like legato and melodic, gosh, I mean, I'll listen to Brett Garsett. I recommend your listeners actually listen to him. And Eric Johnson is amazing. You know, I've just got so many people that I love listening to, but also love my Deep Purple as well. You know, there's such great guitar players around. For me, I think I'm a great guitar player for a songwriter. Actually, even better, I'm a great guitar player for a drummer. But guys like George Lynch, that guy could play any guitar through any amp, anywhere, and sound like George Lynch. No one plays like him. He just is completely very demented, little dark. I love it, you know, but little spooky. That's why they call him Mr. Scary.
Not that heavy, not that light. It's just like the perfect match.
Perfect match. And that's what I like. You're talking about yin and yang. You know, to me, it's like when I listen to this, what made the Beatles work? What made the Beatles work was the tension between John Lennon and Paul McCartney. It just worked. Because here's an example for a songwriter in a song. Okay, here's Paul McCartney. I gotta believe it's getting better. It's getting better all the time. John Lennon, it can't get no worse. Those two working together, it works. And if you think about the great rock bands out there, they always seem to have a killer lead singer, frontman guy, and a killer lead guitar player. And they always had tension. I mean, think about Van Halen, right? Think about that as a great example. And it worked, right? Think about Aerosmith, same thing. Those guys didn't get along all the time. They fought like cats and dogs. But the tension worked, the yin and the yang, it worked. Got a new project that I'm putting together called Firstborn Sons. And it's really cool. It's like sonically, it's best described as the Eagles during their Joe Walsh period and Lynyrd Skynyrd. So it's very guitar oriented. And what makes it work is that I come from a Beatles background as a songwriter, but one of my partners in this is a kid named Scotty Bratcher, and he's 100% Rolling Stones. Very bluesy, really great guitar player. But my Beatles pop songwriting and his Rolling Stones guitar playing is that yin and yang that works. It's the sweet with the sour. You know, I know it sounds like it's schizophrenic, but it's not. I promise you, when you hear it, you'll get it. It makes a lot of sense musically, and no one's going to know why it's hitting them on two different levels, but I'm giving you guys the secret now. It's just basically sweet and sour.
Yes. And you mentioned John Kalodner. He was part of the beginning of your career. Mm-hmm. Yes, he helped you guys in the beginning. How was the contact with him? How that contact became after the Rain, that great, the 30 Platinum album? How this beginning reality, you guys and John Kalodner?
Well, at the time, John Kalodner was a legend. And, you know, he was working on, he'd just done the Whitesnake record, the big one. 3 giant Aerosmith records. He was working on the Pump record at the time. He was like this superstar guy. And at Geffen Records, David Geffen, the owner, was very smart. He had 3 superstar record company guys called A&R men. 3 guys. You had, and they were all in different wings of the same building on Sunset Boulevard. He did that on purpose. He wanted that feeling of competition going on, right? And each one of those executives was very particular about the acts he was working with. Okay, so you had John Kalodner, you had Tom Zutaut, and Tom Zutaut had Guns N' Roses, right? And then you had a guy named Gary Gersh. There were 3 guys there. John was really pretty much the most consistently successful guy. In his early career, he put Foreigner together, got them signed. He signed AC/DC. He's the guy that put Aerosmith back together when they were having their drug problems. They went to rehab. He put them back together. And that was all before we came along. So he was a guy that we really focused on because we knew that developing our sound was going to take a year or two. And in the record world back then, a guy could be an executive for a month at a label. I mean, he could get his gig and then have one project that didn't work and he'd get fired and they'd hire a new guy. So we wanted to pick, if possible, one guy at a label who wasn't in danger of getting fired. So we would have enough time to develop the project. And fortunately, John saw something in the two of us. The way he looked at us, he never thought of us as heavy metal. He loved bands like that came out of Southern California, like the Hollies. And he thought that we were kind of like a heavier version, a modern version of that. That's what he was really going for. And he had nothing that he was working with that did that. So we kept on bringing him demos and writing songs and bringing them to his office and playing them for him over the course of about a year. And he still wasn't signing us. He was encouraging us, and he still wasn't signing us to a label deal. And we got to the point where we were broke. We had $9 in the bank, and Matthew and I were living out of a car, and we had no other option at that particular point. And that was the morning that we wrote what would become Love and Affection, our first number one. And we went down to John's office on Sunset Boulevard and broke into his office. You usually have to make an appointment for the guy. And we told him to sit down and shut up and listen to our new song. And we played him Love and Affection on acoustic. And it was like out of a movie. When we got done with that, he just got this big smile on his face. And he said, "That's what I've been wanting to see. I've been wanting to see that you guys had the balls to come down here and take your destiny and give me something that I could work with." And he picked up the phone and called Business Affairs and signed us. And that's where we really started. But that was the beginning of working with John, was that we had some managers at the time that could get a meeting, and he met us for the first time and saw something there. But it took us about a year and a half to really write all the songs and develop to the point where we could go into the studio and make the After the Rain record.
And you guys recorded several demos, but only 10 or 12 entered in the album After the Rain, yes?
Yeah,
but,
we had to choose 12 of the songs, but I think we did about 60 demos. It was a lot of work, but we realized when we were having meetings with John Kalodner, and I'll only admit this now, but we knew when we were writing songs which ones were stronger than the others, but we realized when we would write songs, and then we'd go to a little recording studio and make a demo. Back then you had to make a demo. Now everybody's got a laptop and great recording software and they can do full records at home. Back then there was a process. You had very limited technology. It didn't sound professional when you made your demos. And so the goal was to get a record deal where they would basically pay to go into the big studio and make a real record. And we were at that phase where we were bringing songs into John for approval. And we would basically, like every 4 or 5 weeks, we'd come in with 3 new songs that we'd written and recorded the best that we could. And we found out over time that John tended to approve 1 of the 3 songs. So he would throw away 2 of them and be glowing about one of the 3. And there were times when we knew that we turned in 3 really great songs, and we didn't want to lose those great songs for no reason, just because John was on a power trip. And so we started recycling his rejected songs back into the 3s that we would bring in. And so we'd go in there and before you know it, he would always approve 1 of 3. And after a year, he'd approved all of the songs that we wanted. So that's what became the After the Rain record, was the songs that Matthew and I really wanted on that album. And we did whatever it took to get them approved by John Kalodner.
Yes, and for me, one of the most underrated albums, it's Imaginator. It's a great album, an awesome album that not had to recognize it. And why why the record company hold up the album that in not releasing the time? What's the real reason?
Great question. That is a great question. Politically speaking, you got to think about the time. Okay, we were on Geffen Records, and Geffen Records was the record label that signed Nirvana. Okay, so they signed Nirvana in the middle of our After the Rain World Tour. We were out doing shows every night, and then Geffen Records realized they could go up to Seattle and they could buy a finished album off an independent label, put their own sticker on it, and have a Nirvana. And so, and not spend any money. They'd spend $15,000 buying a done record from an independent. And in our case at that time, the big rock bands like Whitesnake, they were making videos that were $500,000. So I think it was a good opportunity for the labels at the time to do a reset, much like they did with the death of disco when they went away from Donna Summer, who was making $1 million albums back then in 1970s money, in exchange for punk that was out of England at the time, and they didn't have to spend any money on it. I think it was a really more of a financial reset than an organic musical thing. And you know, there was some good music that came out of that, but as a guitar player and a lyricist, the whole grunge era was very difficult for me as a person. When I was listening to it, it wasn't that I was bitter, it's just that I didn't understand any of it. You know, I didn't understand making songs with no guitar playing in it. And it was like 8 years, there was no guitar solo in anything. You went from an era with the best guitar players in the world into this era where it was all about the attitude. And the different attitude was in my era, we were like the bookend for an era where everyone was living on a prayer. Everyone was hopeful. You know, everybody was out there, fists in the air and doing that. And then you go to grunge, and the philosophy of grunge was the world sucks and everybody owes me and I'm a victim and I hate you. And it was just a philosophical change that was pretty violent when you think about it. So we did our Imaginator record at the time because what we had experienced, it's funny now talking about it, it was just 25 years in advance of what we have all just experienced, where I saw that the media had way too much power, that the media was set up to lie to us and to sell to us, and it was all kind of like hypnosis and brainwashing and all that. We saw that 30 years ago. That's why we did the Imaginator record. It was about being brainwashed by the media. And I think it scared the hell out of the record company. When we came into the meeting to play them the Imaginator record, they hadn't heard anything. And I think what they were expecting was I Can't Live Without Your Love and Affection Part 2. They wanted a continuation of that. And we were pretty angry, to be honest with you, because the same television shows that were giving us coverage the first time we went around with the After the Rain record wouldn't return our phone calls. And we realized that same media that can make you, that can build you and make you, can also break you too. It depends. And we didn't know why. We'd done so many favors for people and went above and beyond to make them happy. And then the next thing you know, we represented an era of music through no fault of our own that was completely out of fashion. So, and we were so iconic with our approach with it, with the colorful videos and the long hair and the confidence and the hope and all that, that we were very easy to attack because we represented the old guard, so to speak. The way I look at it is it just wasn't our time at that time. But here we are all these years later, and new opportunities are coming up every single day. And we're not going to quit, not ever. You know, we've already been number one. We've already made millions and millions of dollars. We've already been famous. And we can't be tempted by any of that stuff because we know what that costs you. So it makes us very dangerous people right now. Now we're doing it for the love and for the art. And we're not motivated by any of that other stuff that I suppose record companies have used to control artists all of these years. They can't tempt me with anything. So now it's all about making a connection with people and releasing the best songs I possibly can and building my own legacy of a body of work that, you know, decades later, people go, man, that song was really there for me at that time. Thanks for that. That's all I want.
Yes.
I have a question about the dogs in the Cape of the second album. Like, why did you choose the dogs? Like, it's so funny. And Leandro was talking about that in his childhood. It was like very funny to him. So
And when I was child, my brother is older than me, and he got the CD. And when I see that art cover, I love when I was a child. You see the dogs and the cover. It was my first contact with the Nelson. Wasn't because I can.
Oh, cool. Yeah, there's an artist, a very famous artist named William Wegman. And William Wegman is famous for taking photographs of his Weimaraner dogs. Okay, he puts them in situations all over the world, and his photographs sell for millions of dollars. He's in the big art galleries all over the world. David Geffen, the owner of the record company, is an art collector. He's always been. So every time he would make money, he would invest in a work of art and make millions and millions of dollars on that. Through his art collecting, he became friends with William Wegman. And I knew that, and I mentioned in a meeting with Mr. Geffen once, you know, it'd be super cool. I mean, the whole long hair thing's so iconic. Why don't we have William take a photo of that? And he loved that idea. I didn't think he was going to want to do it, but he did it. And it turned out that's the only Grammy nomination we have ever had was for the album art on Because They Can, because of that. Now you do know where the title comes from, right? No? Well, your big brother should have told you. The title, Because They Can, is the answer to a joke here in the States. Why do dogs lick themselves? Because they can. Right on.
Great. I never imagined.
it's like we have something similar here that's like because God wanted to. And it's almost the same thing. So I think like our last questions about the discography was about the demos of the After the Rain disc, because you told us that you had like 60 demos of the first record. So is there any song that you wanted to be to get on the album that didn't, or you used them in the previous records?
That's a great question. I think at the time, the songs that we picked for the After the Rain record were the best that we could do at the time. Now, if you go forward, I see about 15 years ago, I mentioned a record that we made called Lightning Strikes Twice. And Lightning Strikes Twice was very special to me, and it kind of addresses your question. All of the songs on Lightning Strikes Twice were the songs that I wish I were capable of writing and producing when I made the After the Rain record. The record company had come to me, and it was that Italian label Frontiers. And the head of the label was a Nelson fan. And he said, you know, I've often wondered what it would have been like, what the follow-up record to After the Rain would have been if you had gotten unlimited support from the industry, from your record label, from your fans, to really unapologetically put a part 2 out there of where the After the Rain record had started. If you had that ability to do that, what would that record have been? That's how I approached the Lightning Strikes Twice record. It was the follow-up record to After the Rain that we were not allowed to make back in the day for a variety of reasons. That's why it's so close to my heart. That's why I love it. You know, I didn't care about any kind of judgment or anything at all. I just literally made the best vintage Nelson record I possibly could at that time. And there were some songs on that record that I really, really like. And had that, let's say After the Rain had come out in 1988, not 1990, that John Kolodner had approved the songs quicker, and it had been allowed to come out in 1988. And then the Lightning Strikes Twice record, had that come out in 1990, I think the whole career trajectory would have been completely different. We would have had a much, much easier time sustaining all of these years had we been allowed to do that. So I try to find meaning in everything, because that was to me kind of a tragedy. I did get to make the Lightning Strikes Twice record. I'm very proud of it. And fortunately, James Gunn likes to get Back to You off of it. And so it wasn't a wasted effort, which is cool. But I also think now, I think the timing is right. I think the timing is finally right to start doing some touring. And I don't think any of that bias from the guys that you were talking about that you used to date that wouldn't admit that they were listening to Nelson records, that's all gone now. If you notice, here we are all these years later, and I can look back at certain records and go, you know what? I didn't get it back then, but I get it now. That's really good stuff. I think people are far more open now to that. And I think they're younger generations as well, discovering our music every single day. Every time, like say Aerosmith got in Guitar Hero and stuff, there was a whole generation of kids that had no idea who Aerosmith was. And now they know their songs from playing Guitar Hero during COVID. Now nowadays with the internet, and also with great TV shows like I was mentioning, I find that things change all the time. And I think we might be coming into an era where playing Nelson concerts is a pretty cool thing to do and a pretty cool show to go to.
Yes. And you were saying about the Lightning Strikes Twice, and we got a awesome album too, we call Peace Out. It's so similar with Lightning Strikes. I love that both albums is amazing. It had the same sound of After the Rain. We have a new album, or any chance for a new album that sounds like that, or not?
We have all of the songs already written for a new Nelson record, and it's very, very probable with what's going on with this television opportunity I was talking about, that we're working with Universal right now. So UME is a big label. It's one of the big ones. And we're working with them. And we did a deal for our entire catalog of music that was on our independent label with them. This is the same label that also has the early Geffen records as well. So now we're under one corporate roof. And I have a feeling that they're going to want a brand new Nelson record. So I'd be really excited to do that. It wouldn't take that long to do. Like I said, all the songs are ready to go. And I just want the right time to do that. It takes, it's a lot of work to put a Nelson record together. Like there are some bands that, and I love them for this, they can get in a room, say it's like 3 guys, say it's like Green Day. And they can get together and they can jam things out, and that's how they record. They record together, and they just mic all of their instruments, and they vibe off each other, and they can see each other in the studio. And recording like that is fairly quick to do that. Nelson records are made the same way, say Tom Scholz makes a Boston record. For the most part, I'm doing everything myself, and you're doing one track at a time, and it takes a certain amount of time to do that. I mean, I do a lot of my recording from 10 o'clock at night to 4 o'clock in the morning when everybody's asleep. And so I don't have every now and again we get a stunt guitar player coming in and doing a solo if I just kind of want that feel. But that's kind of what I explained to the Frontiers guys, was they wanted it turned around like right away when we were making the Lightning Strikes Twice record. And I said, look, guys, I don't think you understand my process. I'm working as fast as I can. I'm not agonizing over things. I hear it in my head, done. I know what it's supposed to sound like, but there's a certain amount of steps I need to take in order to make that a reality. Like Nelson's sound is very layered. There's a lot of stuff going on, just like a Queen record. When you listen to those background vocals, I'm singing every one of them. And sometimes there are 60. So you just have to do 60 passes on that stuff to make it sound a certain way. It takes a little bit of time, but it doesn't really matter if people connect with it. That's what I'm saying. I mean, sometimes you can have something that's incredibly simple, and I love records that hit like that. Like there was years and years ago, there was an artist named Suzanne Vega, and she had a song that was literally her going. That was a whole song. Was her doing that, and like singing into a microphone. It was one take, and it probably took her the amount of time to actually sing those words, which is 3 minutes and 20 seconds, and it went number one. And then I'm the idiot who's sitting here for 13 months at a time, agonizing over every single track on a record. But that's just kind of what Nelson's sound has always been, and I like that. I like the fact that the songs are composed. It's all really orchestrated, and if there are any moments that sound like they're spontaneous, that's also designed into it too. We kind of mean every single note that we put on there. So. Might I be too intense about that? Should I relax a little bit? Well, yeah, maybe, but that's not the way I did it with the Lightning Strikes Twice record. And you mentioned Peace Out. The only difference in Peace Out, and I do regret it, I think that the style was the same, but sonically, and it kills me, I had to cut a couple of corners because I wasn't able to go into the studio that I wanted to go into to record the drums. They basically, the Frontiers guy gave me half the money for Peace Out that he did for Lightning Strikes Twice. Long story, don't want to go into it. I'm grateful to them for the opportunities, but when someone says, hey, this is what your budget is going to be, and then a week into it, they go, hey, we've decided we're giving you half of that money. Every penny of that actually goes into the recording of things. So I could be more proud of Peace Out as far as sonically how it turned out. But I honestly did the best I possibly could. And I think sonically you can truly hear the difference between Peace Out and Lightning. Lightning was like a no apologies record. Just went for it. I was really, really lucky to work with a great mix engineer named Jay Rustin. And he did all the Steel Panther records, and he's done a bunch of other stuff. He's a great mixer. And was able to get a really good mastering engineer and really approach it the way that we approached the After the Rain record 30 years earlier. We were able to do the best we could. And all these years later, I'm just stoked because, again, like I was saying, getting a phone call out of the blue from a director that I really admire who's done sound. I mean, the soundtracks on Guardians of the Galaxy are amazing. This guy actually, he loves music like we all do. He actually writes the music into the script. Like most people, they make their movies and then they work with a music supervisor who puts music to the movie after the fact. James Gunn doesn't do that. He actually writes the songs into the script and he hears it in his head when he's writing. And you can kind of tell from the movies that he's produced, it's kind of that way. You can kind of tell. The movies wouldn't be the same without the specific music that was chosen for his work. So it's going to be a pretty interesting year. 2025 is going to be pretty cool.
Oh, great. And we have some tips about the sonority of the new album. Have some hints, some tips.
Well, what we're working on right now is pretty interesting. We're actually working on a book. We're working on a biography of our story. And it's interesting because we were going to work with an outside writer. And originally, we were going to do some interviews and talk about the defining moments in our lives. And then he was going to transcribe that, and that was going to be our book. That's how most people in my line of work do it. They have a ghostwriter, they call it, who does the physical writing and stuff. Anyways, we found out that both Matthew and I have very particular writing styles. and it didn't translate well. You know, we spent a year with the ghostwriter doing interviews, and I finally got some pages from him, and when I read it, I went, that doesn't sound like me at all. It doesn't have my tone at all. And we realized about a month ago, after working on it for a year, that we were going to have to do all of the writing ourselves just to get the flavor and the personality in there. So that's what I'm doing. I just have two more Christmas shows this December. And other than that, all I'm doing is finishing the book, just writing that book right now.
Oh, I absolutely love biographies, autobiographies. So I'm very excited. I'm sorry, just like
no,
because
you know, our challenge was I'm trying to figure out how to best do it, because Motley Crue did their book, The Dirt, and it was really cool how they handled it, because they have 4 guys in the band, and each one kind of did their own little take on events that on the same event that happened, and they kind of went back and forth. And I thought that was really interesting, because I could see how Tommy Lee felt about a certain something based on you know, compared to how Vince kind of took it and so on. And we were originally going to try to do that with me and Matthew in our book, because we've got things that happen to us in our lives, and these great experiences in our lives. And funny enough, even though we're twins, even though technically we went through it together, his take on it might be completely different than mine. And the challenge has been to not show my twin any of my writing at all. We've basically taken all of we call them the big rocks, the big defining moments, and listed them. And I'm looking at each number, and I'm writing my take on each event. And Matthew's doing his separately. So we're not going to compare notes at all. And I'm not going to know what he's written on. I think it's going to be a really interesting book.
And since we are waiting for you to be in Brazil next year, which I really want to, I think I must be buying this book, because I want you guys to autograph it. So, Leandro, let's go to the last and funniest question of them all.
After we talking about your arrival in Brazil in the 90s, I want to ask you one more question about your side projects.
Okay.
You playing Sonic Heroes video game? I'm playing video games. I'm going through to fourths, but I'm still playing video games. I did not know that you recorded a song for that game, but I did not know. I only know a few weeks ago. And how you composed that song? How became that idea? This invitation?
Oh, well, there was a gentleman named Jun Sanu, and he works for the video company that does Sonic the Hedgehog. And years ago, they were putting a video game together, and it was Sonic and his friends, and they called it Team Chaotix. And I just June remembers me from when I was over in Japan with Nelson years earlier. I'm one of those guys, wherever I go and when I meet people and I get their business card, I save it, I keep it, I make a note on it and all that, and I always follow up. And I've made so many friends that have come back years, if not decades later, and said, "Hey, do you remember meeting me, you know, in Tokyo at this hibachi restaurant? And we were talking about the fact that I was getting into video games. Well, now I run the whole project for Sonic the Hedgehog, and I want to commission you to do a song." Now that's kind of tough to do, you guys. You know, basically, when somebody, when June actually contacted me, he gave me just a rough background on what the video game was going to be about, and he said there are 4 characters, and each one of the 4 characters has his own theme song. And so I wrote the theme song for Sonic, for the main character. And it was really fun to do. We had a lot of fun, recorded the whole thing start to finish in one day, and had to write the lyrics around the notes that June gave me on the character, like his personality traits and stuff. And yeah, the lyrics are a little weird, but I think it turned out pretty well. Did you ever hear the song, the Team Chaotix song? Did you ever hear it? It's
Yeah, I remember the songs, but there's so many. There's a long time ago that I didn't play the record, the video game, but I remember the songs.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So look, it was fun. I mean, that's the one thing about making music, you guys. I get to go all over the world. Every day is different. I have no security. You know, I don't get my paycheck every Friday, and there's no security or certainty in anything. But it's always exciting, and I'm always looking for the next opportunity, and I'm always looking for the next challenge. And doing things like writing a song for Sonic the Hedgehog for Sega, that was cool. And the a couple of years ago, we wrote an original Christmas song that also connected and went top five in our charts here 2 years in a row. That's difficult to do, to write an original Christmas song that impacts people. And I love challenges like that. I have a lot of fun doing that. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe this is this thing coming up this year with the Peacemaker is going to lead to more music and more opportunities in TV and film, which would be fun. Because to me, it's just a good way to get a lot of people hearing your music, you know. But my first love is always going to be touring, is getting out there and doing concerts. That's what I love to do.
Great. And I forgot to ask you a question about your demos. I forgot and let it pass. There's a rumors that guys like Vivian Campbell, the Skid Row guys, playing in that demos. It's a rumor. It's not really, or it really happened.
It's real. It's real. Before we put the Final Nelson band together, Vivian Campbell was our guitar player. And so that was before we got signed. He was a good friend. And boy, way early on as well, when we were writing songs for that first record, we were spending a lot of time in New Jersey. And we were writing with a friend of ours named Jack Ponte. And there was a music store that was down there. They sold guitars and all that. And Jack brought us into that guitar store. And the two guys that were behind the counter working at the guitar store were Snake Sabo and Scotty Hill. And they were just working behind the counter, and they were kind of friends of Jack's. And they were, you know, we got to hang out while I was there on that trip. And I remember being on the front porch of our friend Jack's house, and Snake said, yeah, we've got this concept for a band. You know, Scotty and I want to put a band together. We want to call it Skid Row. We know what the name is going to be. We want it to be called Skid Row. And we've got one song that we've written for it. And we're still looking for the right lead singer, because we don't think that this band is actually going to work without the right lead singer. And we can't seem to find him yet. So that was before they had found Sebastian. They some local guy doing it, but they knew he wasn't the right guy.
Do you know, like, what year was it? Like the...
Yeah, this would have been 1988, 87. It would have been 87. So, yeah, about 1987. And I remember Snake playing me a cassette of the demo of Youth Gone Wild. And how cool that was, where, you know, those guys obviously got it together a little sooner than we did, about a year before us. They were taken under the wing of John Bon Jovi, who lived in New Jersey at the time. And John signed them to a publishing deal and put them on tour. And man, I was really happy for them. But you're absolutely right. Snake and Scotty wound up playing on a demo that Matthew and I made with Jack Ponte, and to try to get a record deal. Now, before we got signed by Geffen, we were turned down by every record label in New York and in Los Angeles with that demo that I'm talking about. The songs were not that great at the time. We were still learning how to write, and the songs were developing. Our sound was developing, and we just weren't ready yet. But we did get a chance to meet and record with Snake and with Scotty, which was cool. Rob Alfuso, their drummer, also was the drummer on the session. And then we went back to Los Angeles and hooked up with Vivian Campbell, and he just gotten out of the Dio gig, and he was the nicest guy in the world. And he also knew John Kolodner at the time too. And yeah, we've got a lot of people that we played with over the years, and who we're friends with, where people would take a step back and go, man, you really like go out and tour with Frank Hannon? from Tesla? It's like, yeah, you know, Frank digs us. He thinks we're good players and good songwriters, and we're buddies and stuff. And so tight with those guys, and you wouldn't think it. But I think the older that you get, and you realize in our line of work, like we're all in the same fight together. We're all in the same trenches. We've gone out and sacrificed pretty much everything to bring the music to people. You know, we've lost marriages. We've had kids raised where we couldn't be there for their birthdays because we were out doing shows. We all have fought the same fight. So I found that the more competent players that are out there, and even the ones that are from a different genre or a different subset of rock and roll, like you know, I would never know that. Let me give you a great example. Like the first time I met Zakk Wylde, he's sitting there with the leather and the biceps and the beard and the whole thing, like looking all that intimidating. And he came up and he was just the nicest guy ever and liked our music. And I got to say, like your music. I remember when you were actually trying to get the Ozzy gig and you were back in New Jersey with Snake and Scotty, and you know, you would come into that same guitar store and all that. That's how old we are. We've been doing this for a long, long time. But you always cross paths in our line of work with all of these people who, you know, they might be from a different genre. I mean, I'm super tight with Vince Neil, you know, and Nelson and Motley Crue can never be confused with each other, you know, but we still dig each other personally, you know, and that's just kind of the way it is. We've all, like I said, we've all fought the same fight, and we have respect for one another because after all of these years, we're still here fighting the good fight.
And it's something that I really like to bring up in the interviews. It's like that with me and Leandro, we have a huge age gap because Leandro is like 40 and I am like 19, and I am for like 2005, and I like enjoy so much you guys. And sometimes people keep talking about, wow, this new generation doesn't like be that much interested in the like old rock music, but it's so nice because I am really glad to listen to all those stories about your career, about music, about the way that you think about music. It's something that it's really inspiring. And for even though I don't make music, I really enjoy to write about it, and it can be like very tough. So seeing you talking about this stuff is really inspiring, and I really I really hope that you guys be here in Brazil next year. So because you are one of the best guests we ever had. You are a very kind guy.
Well,
so
thank you. Well, we're now friends, so we should stay in touch. And I just, based on what you were saying, I appreciate you being as young as you are and wanting to go back and listen to that music, because the one thing I just want to share with you is in my day, music was the point of everything. Okay, now it's become the background in a video game. But back when I started making music, it was the thing. Okay, people used to save up their money to go down and buy their favorite band's record. There were no listening stations. You just had to hope the record was good. You know, if you heard a single on the radio and that band came out with an album to follow that up, you would go down there and you'd buy that record. You'd save up your money because they were coming to town. You'd go to the concert. That was what we did as kids. And we did. We didn't have video games. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have any of that stuff. So, man, hell, when Van Halen would come to town, the whole town would shut up and everybody would go to the show, you know? So you're having to be a kid and be a music listener and lover in an era where people don't tend to do that anymore. People are just busy on their phones, or they've got some Pandora station or Spotify playing in the background, or whatever it is you have in Brazil, like a subscription service, and it's just noise. It's become noise. Um, I would venture to say you don't look at music that way. Music's important to you. You know, music is something that you rely on and you're interested in, and you want to hear the stories behind the songs and all that. When music came out for us back in the day, it was on vinyl, and big LP would come out, and the first thing we would do, we'd run and we get the record, we'd bring it home, we would put it on the turntable, which forced us to be present. You couldn't do that. It's very deliberate. You can't like just put it on and whatever, like put on a playlist. You'd have to take the physical record out, put it on there, put the needle on, sit back and listen to it. And the first thing that you did was you opened up that record and you read the liner notes and you looked at the pictures and you went to a different place as a music listener, and you let your mind fill in all the blanks. It's like the difference between reading a good book and seeing a movie. Both have their place. Both are very cool. Okay. But you can be lazier when you're watching a movie because they give you the characters, they give you the tone, they give you all the stuff. When you're reading a book, your brain is filling in all the blanks in between, and you're imagining what the character would talk like and what their attitudes would be and what they look like and all that. That's kind of magical, I think. And yeah, maybe we come from more of the book era, but I think in this crazy world that's busy and kinetic and aggressive and full of disinformation and all that, the shining light that is in there of being present and sitting down with your favorite music and kind of escaping into that world that's in your mind, I think it's wonderful. And I actually take a lot of time to do that, to be present and to be quiet and to listen to my favorite music and to escape into it. And in my case, as a producer, I have to learn from all these records that are being made. And every now and again, it's rare because I pretty much know how to do everything in the studio, but every now and again, some kid will come up with something and I'll go, holy crap, what is that? I never heard that before. How'd they make that sound? Or they went to this really interesting place with a chord change that I wouldn't have thought of. That's what keeps me going. That's what turns me on as a creative. I love doing that. I love making music as much as you love listening to it and going to shows.
So now we go to our last question and the funniest part of the interview.
In 91, 92, you came to Brazil to a couple of the television programs. Do you like to be here, guys? And why did you decide to do no shows in Brazil? And how was the participate to these television programs? Was 3 television programs, I think, yeah?
I think so. We actually were sponsored by Gugu. And he was a big fan of ours back in the day. And so he had us come down to Brazil. And as I mentioned, I talked to you about we were booked in the middle of that tour. There was no security and it was violent and it was really harsh when we went to do that show with Sepultura. And our security person who was there with us that we hired, we were way out in the country. And like I said, people had been drinking and fighting for 3 days. And my security man, Hanato, said, boss, I can't protect you. If you go out on that stage looking like you do, playing acoustic guitars in front of that crowd, they're going to kill you. Literally. You can't do it. So I turned to the promoter and I said, well, you heard Hanato. I've got to listen to my security guy. And I looked down and the promoter had an Uzi on me. He had a gun pointed at me. And then I turned around and I looked at Hanato, and Hanato had a gun pointed at the promoter. So I was caught in between 2 guys with guns who were trying to force me on stage. And that's why we wound up leaving Brazil quickly, was because we kind of realized, well, this particular promoter obviously was not the most honest guy. And I was in the countryside in Brazil, and I could disappear, and no one would know what would happen to me at all. So we just wanted to get home at that particular time. Now things have obviously changed between then and now, and it's definitely time to come back. It is, but it was one of those things that we didn't talk about in interviews because we didn't really know what to make of it. We'd never been in a situation like that before, where we were literally scared for our own lives at that particular time. I mean, I was surrounded by like 9 people, all had guns, and I was in the middle of it. And it was just because there was no security. And I'm glad we made it back, safe and sound. But that's why we left Brazil, and that's why we haven't come back up until now, is because we haven't had enough friends to want to insulate us and protect us and sponsor us and bring us down there. But I think it's different now, But
we promise you that it won't happen again.
That's not a great rock and roll story, because it actually happened.
And about the programs you participated, you said that Google invites you, and you participated in one program of television, and you participated too in the Hora do Capeta.
Yeah.
Sérgio Malandro.
Well, all we did was we went where they told us to go. Obviously there's a language barrier. So when people are speaking Portuguese, I'm only catching certain words in it. And you think, okay, the record company, it's basically what happens is we had Geffen Records at the time in the United States, and then they would work with a local record company in Brazil. Okay, they would have an agreement. So any of the United States artists that were on Geffen, when they would come down to Brazil, they would work with a particular local record company. Now that's whether or not it was Aerosmith or Whitesnake or whatever at the time. And so we were working with the local Geffen rep down there. And when the local guy said, okay, I've got these television shows we're going to be doing with you guys, these radio programs, and you're going to be playing this concert. We just went and we did it. And you got to think from our point of view, I mean, some of the TV shows down there compared to American TV shows are crazy, in a good way. You got, people everywhere, beautiful topless women. It's crazy. It's nuts. And no one's speaking English. So Matthew and I are standing there looking like we do, not understanding a word people are saying. And it was very, very interesting. I had a lot of fun, but for all I know, they were making fun of us the entire time and I wouldn't know.
And it's very funny because the Hora do Capeta show, it's translated in English with Demon's Time. Yeah, Devil's Time. And it is like yeah. And I don't think that today we have those kind of crazy TV shows, but they are still colorful, too much.
You can imagine, Leonard, in Brazil, the television's program here in Brazil, it's craziest programs that you have ever watched before. I don't know if you have the possibility to watch some of the programs, but it's very weird, very crazy.
Well,
at the time,
I love that. And before I come down there, I'll definitely do my research and watch the television show, so I won't be surprised. But I will say the people in Brazil are beautiful. They really are. And salt of the earth, great hearts, killer rock fans. And we definitely have to put a tour together and come on down there for real.
If you said just for us first finish, that time is real. What's the 3 best albums for you of all time?
Wow.
Change your life.
Kind of like a first date question. You're dating somebody for the first time. Okay, what are your favorite 3 records?
We're gonna judge you.
Okay, cool. Let me think here. Favorite 3.
Just kidding.
Let me see here. Okay. Led Zeppelin 4. Let me think here.
Led Zeppelin 4 always have in the list.
Well, it's a great record, man. It's a great record.
It must be.
Let me think here.
Boston.
That's right up there. I was thinking about the first Boston record. So I will. Now we can't choose greatest hits records. You can't do greatest hits records.
Well, you can.
That would put out Eagles' greatest hits 1 and 2. That'd be out of the running, and the Beach Boys' Endless Summer would also be out of the running because they're greatest hits. So
great.
The Beatles' White Album, Led Zeppelin 4, and Dark Side of the Moon.
Those are
Awesome choice.
classics.
I mean, it's tough bringing it down to 3, isn't it?
Yeah. If you want to do a 5, you can also. Like, we have a 3 already.
Gosh. I mean, I know what records were important to me as a kid growing up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but they I don't think they'd be anything that you guys would know. There was a band back in the 80s called The Knack. They had a song called My Sharona. And their first album was an album called Get the Knack. That whole record is brilliant. As a pop record, it is absolutely brilliant, start to finish. All the songs are amazing. It's about teenage angst and sexual tension, and you can hear the band vibing off each other. That's a magical record to me. And the other one would be, believe it or not, Heartbeat City by the Cars.
A good one.
Like, basically anything Mutt Lange touches turns to gold. He's
For
the best
real.
writer producer ever. But boy, he knocked it out of the park with Heartbeat City, I think. Oh, there you go. I mean, think
It's
about it.
everywhere.
You do AC/DC, Def Leppard, The Corrs, and Shania Twain, and still
And Foreigner.
make them sound amazing. All of them.
Yes.
So that was it for today. We were lost in track because you are a very nice person to talk to.
Thank you.
So we kind of we're talking like we were friends, and I think that we are now.
Yeah.
And I really I am really very proud of you. I think I should tell you that because
Thank
it's
you.
not easy to surpass all those years in the streaming area, the music industry. They are very tough to handle, and as a producer, we have a few friends that are musicians and producers too, and we know how hard it is to put effort in your work and to have their recognition.
Good word. Good word.
Yeah, yeah. It's. I think you got it. So
Yeah, I guess-
we are.
Hang on. All right. There's Walter.
Oh my God! Hello, Walter. You are blonde like your father. That's very nice.
Oh, thank you.
So we
Well-
thank you a lot for this
you're
interview. So we are very glad. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You guys, nice to meet you both. And we'll talk to you again soon, I'm sure.
Yes. Thank you, Gunnar.
Thank you. Bye,
Thank
guys.
you. See you. Bye-bye.